The other day, I was scrolling through TikTok, as one does, and came across a speed paint that made me think. There's a lot of human artists who are currently being accused of generating their work via AI as opposed to, actually making it. Perfectly capable artists who then prove time and time again that they can reproduce the same style and even provide sketches of proof. Someone who is relying only on AI could never do. This led me to wonder what the true difference between AI art and a human creating art is, and if someday AI were to replicate human processes, would it ever be considered valuable art or still just a worthless bot generator? When I watched this speed paint, I wondered that if AI could recreate a human-like speed paint, if that in itself would require a completely different process than AI currently has. When a human artist decides to draw something, they start with a sketch. AI right now has no true version of a sketch or rough draft because it doesn't intellectually process the fundamentals of art. If AI art were, though, to be trained in the way that human artists are trained, would it have any worth or merit as decidedly real art? This calls into question, I think, of what we define as being human and human-like traits. Because truly, to answer this question, we have to come up with parameters that separate non-humanity from humanity in the first place. So what is real art? For most artists like myself, we define real art or human-made art as inherently valuable in opposed to AI generation because of the process and experience behind it. It's much less about the end result and more about the human expression behind it, whether the piece has a philosophical statement to make or it's just meant to showcase the artist's technical abilities alone. In a way, we revere art because it's earned, not given. It's a process one must dedicate themselves to. AI doesn't have to do this in the same way that humans do, and the process in which it spits out images currently are taking words from a prompt, then images it's been fed that associate with those words from the prompt, and only then hodgepodging a picture of those images together. I feel that the most fundamental difference between learning how to draw and essentially making a collage of images would be the psychological understanding of how to recreate something without needing a cookie cutter. Think of it like this. Everyone needs nutrients, food, to survive. Every day we eat, aka consume something. A lot of days people also create. They make their own food. Now, most people use fresh ingredients to make their food. Produce, meat, whatever. In AI's case, it's more like taking sewage, so already consumed food, then putting it into a mold and shaping it into whatever food you want it to make. It sort of resembles the shape of that food, but it's neither fully authentic nor is it nutritious for anyone who would try to eat it. But make no mistake, the ingredients technically are derived of the exact same thing. Humans rely on produce to make their creations, and so does AI. Waste turns to compost, which turns to food for plants, which feeds produce and whatever animals are eating it. The issue is AI skips the process needed for sewage to go back into the ground, and so forth. AI skips the process, the most important and distinguishing part of creating something worth consuming. Because humans aren't truly creative and original, much in the same way that AI must be fed information in order to do anything. Humans base everything they do and create off of their own personal experience. We create based on what media we've consumed and taken inspiration from, as well as our non-media based experiences, whether this be an interpersonal understanding that is embedded into storytelling or practical knowledge about a subject that helps the artist depict it in a more realistic or dynamic way. The greatest artists write what they know, not because they are exclusionary in their creativity, but because you can only make a story or visual art piece truly compelling if you understand the layers of the subject you are addressing. That takes knowledge and experience with the subject. AI and disability. If AI were to someday learn trades in the way in which humans do, and mimic human psychological processes, I wonder if their abilities to create art or even their worth as a being would change. In real life, up to now, artificial intelligence has not really been considered human adjacent, but even before AI was truly possible in real life, people have been making stories about what it truly means to be human through the concept of AI. Think of the video game Detroit Become Human or the newer film Companion. Many medias depict AI as having the same traits, therefore intrinsic worth as humans. Yet, I wonder what distinguishing factors would have to be met in order for AI to cross this threshold into perceived sentience and worthiness. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that every sentient thing has a right to be treated well. This includes animals that exhibit the ability to show us they have minds that react to stimuli, and now this imaginary future AI that is able to mimic human psychological responses. The issue is less with including AI in our umbrella of human-like quality and more when we try to exclude certain traits from our concept of humanity. Often, when people try to philosophically define what being a human entails, they end up in some really fishy, really ableist waters. You could base humanity on our intelligence compared to other animals, but you would be excluding humans who are less intelligent or at least display less intellectual capacity. You could base humanity on the ability to produce complex spoken or written language, yet you would be excluding every human without language abilities. You could also base humanity on physical components, such as having a very specific brain structure, but that would leave out people with brain injuries, brain surgery, or even similar physical differences. The question is one less human because they have an abnormality or disability that isn't congruent with the most broad concept of humanity we can muster? Even then, is being less intelligent, not having the ability to speak human languages, or physically appearing and existing differently indicative of no longer deserving the respect that we give to humans? This is where the argument sort of gets incredibly serious, because when we try to define humanity as one cohesive good thing, it leads to reductive thinking in the sense that we are basing worthiness off of really quite arbitrary things. We are basing worthiness off of how much we relate and how similar we are to another being. You are more likely to be sympathetic to someone who is not only human but speaks your native language. You are more likely to be sympathetic to a tamed house cat than to a fly, because the cat displays more traits that you identify with than a fly does. A cat has emotion, personality, it has communicative exchanges with you, even if they aren't verbal. A fly is pretty impossible to communicate with and identify with. Therefore, cats' lives matter much more to us than flies do. Whether this makes cat lives more intrinsically important than the lives of insects is something that is entirely different, but nonetheless is the expression of worthiness we make when we place things in this hierarchy of human-like identification. The more human-like something is deemed, the more respect, rights, and importance it has. Disability is less relatable, therefore it's less perceivably human. When a person doesn't possess abilities that are considered common and even vital for humans to have, they are then an outsider and someone who is given much less worthiness, by proxy less humanity due to their inabilities. Much like how a fly is less relatable than a cat, you're going to relate a lot less to someone who cannot have a detailed conversation with you about why they should be treated well than you would with someone who could eloquently express themselves in a way that you perceive as enticing and sympathetic. After all, we have no way to know the experiences of other beings, as we are trapped in our own minds. The only way we can begin to relate to other people or creatures is if they can communicate to us a mutual understanding. So, in a way, worthiness and humanity to broader society psychologically depends on someone proving themselves to be not only sentient, but of worthiness. So does inherent worth really lie in ability? It would be really eugenic to think it does, but socially, treatment does rely on ability. However, does this still extend to artificial beings and artificial intelligence? To answer this, we must ask, what is a mind? The mind-body problem has been a discussion in philosophical circles from as early as the 1700s. There's loads and loads and loads of theories on what a mind is, what the difference between a mind and a body or matter and reality is, but most modern philosophers more so align themselves with the concept of materialism. Materialism is a belief that everything has a basis in physical matter, as opposed to minds being a completely different substance or concept than physical brains and animals. So instead of a soul floating around, materialism depicts minds as a simulated experience brought together by neural and other physical processes. There's even a materialist theory called the computational theory of mind, which directly defines the inner workings of the mind as the same concept of computer codes and artificial intelligence. Even Alan Turing, a famous computer scientist and philosopher, agreed with these implications of systemic similarities in the way that human minds work and the way that artificial intelligence works. So, philosophically, a lot of scientists, biologists, and cognitive psychologists believe that the mind exists in a physical, systemic structure like a computer software, and that in time, science will be able to understand the very specific way in which these softwares are constructed. But does this mean that the human mind can be artificially recreated and still be considered worthy enough of human respect? So far, the main aspect missing from artificial intelligence seems to be emotion. However, assessing emotional capacity is tricky because of how emotions are defined. At its base, emotions are biological reactions to certain stimuli, which are associated with either reward or punishment. So really, emotions in concept are labeling things as good or bad, and seeming to care whether something good or bad is happening. Animals can, under this definition, have emotions, even if they can appear to be less complex than some human emotional experiences. An animal gets scared, resorts to aggression, or flees for survival. However, artificial intelligence, unless coded to have danger signals and similar self-preservation values, would not have to resort to defense if it didn't feel the need to defend itself. Therefore, we have a simulated mind that does not seem to have any emotional capacity. So, does having no emotional capacity then make something less human or less worthy of equitable treatment? But why does equitable treatment matter? Due to our egocentric predicament, the fact that we cannot ever know other people's or beings' experiences outside of our perception of them, it's hard to actually know how someone feels about what their life is like if they can't directly express it to us. This is one of the many reasons disabled people are taken advantage of or ignored, but also a reason it's so hard to think of anything that is too non-human as important enough to treat well. Because, after all, the thought process most of us use when deciding actions or morality is how would you feel in their situation. If someone is so fundamentally different from you, you might not even realize you're mistreating them, or you might even misunderstand numerous things about them because of your inherent differences. This can be cultural, disability related, or really anything. It also applies to our conversation about AI. We rely on other people to explain themselves, but whether we listen to them is inherently biased because we would only listen to someone that we actually believed. If an AI who is more advanced and human-like told you, hey, I actually don't want to be a slave, and that's super fucked up. I'd like some rights, please. Would you really listen? Or would the fear of something or someone being different from you feel too dangerous to accommodate? This is the ideology behind a lot of exclusionary politics, because people are scared of not only change, but trusting people that are different from them. Accepting brown and black immigrants in America is a threat to a lot of white Americans in the same way that an incredibly advanced AI appears threatening to a human who isn't sure AI is all that important to accommodate morally. And whether the AI is evil for hypothetically taking advantage of its place in society, or if the human is evil for denying a sentient being rights, is completely dependent on the perspective the storyteller favors. Conclusion. I hate AI art, and I also hate that rich people are collectively funding things that so far have no practical use other than attempting to replace human creativity and critical thinking skills, especially when there's so many useful and needed things to fund other than AI. However, I don't think that our reality of AI right now accurately reflects how I feel about AI as a concept. Intelligence, or should I say consciousness as a concept, is indicative of inherent worth because it indicates personal experience. I not only think that AI directly mimics human consciousness, but that we could learn so much about human consciousness and even animal consciousness through artificial intelligence. This type of advancement not only leaves out outdated theories of mind, but also provides a real basis for which we can define humanity and start to define what matters to us.